A powerful ruler is murdered, the royal family is decimated, and an empire crumbles into chaos. This is what happened to the Ottoman Empire, one of the most prominent and long-lasting empires in history. But wait, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that Mehmed VI was assassinated by his own wife. And sure, it's also well known that Sultan Bayezid I went insane after being poisoned, murdering his entire family before dying himself. And yeah, it's common knowledge that the empire fell apart after that. But these are just surface-level details, the tip of the iceberg that historians have conveniently chosen to ignore for hundreds of years. So let's dive deep into the murky waters of Ottoman history, because today we will tell you the secret that destroyed the Ottoman Empire. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we'll be exploring the fall of the Ottoman Empire, one of the longest-lasting empires in world history, reigning supreme for over 600 years. Founded by Osman Farquhar in 1299, this Turkish dynasty would go on to conquer vast territories spanning from Eastern Europe to North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. By the late 16th century, the Ottoman Empire stretched as far west as the gates of Vienna and as far east as the borders of China. However, despite their longevity and territorial expanse, very few people know how and why the Ottoman Empire fell. Historians attribute the empire's decline to a myriad of factors such as the overexpansion of the state, the introduction of gunpowder weaponry, and socio-economic issues. But these factors alone cannot explain the sudden collapse of such a mighty empire. There had to be something more, some catalyst that set off the chain of events leading to the empire's demise. And according to the records kept by the Ottomans themselves, that catalyst may have been the murder of the Sultan. In 1512, the Ottoman Sultan, Selim the Grim, who had ruled like a god over his people for the last 8 years, suddenly died under mysterious circumstances. It happened during a military campaign against the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The army had just seized the city of Aleppo when news arrived that the Sultan's brother, the Beylerbey of Damascus, had declared independence and refused to submit to his rule. Upon hearing this, Sultan Selim I assembled his court and prepared for a swift march to Damascus to punish his treacherous brother. However, as he and his entourage traveled through the Syrian desert, they began to experience strange occurrences. First, a member of the Sultan's guard collapsed from unknown causes. Then another, and then another, until soon there were dozens of dead men lying around the camp. All of them were strong and healthy young men, but now they lay still as corpses, victims of a mysterious illness. Soon it was Selim's turn. He too felt the debilitating effects of the disease. In agony, he succumbed to the mysterious illness and died within a few hours. The Ottoman army was left leaderless. His son, the Crown Prince Suleiman, took the throne and returned to Istanbul. Now, to the people of the Ottoman Empire, the death of their sultan seemed suspicious at the time. After all, it wasn't unheard of for members of the royal court to have the sultan poisoned so that they could take the throne. However, this theory was quickly dismissed because of the manner in which Selim died. For, although poisoning was a common method of assassination in the Ottoman Empire, it did not cause the symptoms that Selim experienced. Also, considering that several members of the royal court died alongside Selim, it would have taken a lot of manpower and planning to poison each of them without being caught. Furthermore, even if someone wanted to do such a thing, there was no way to get away with it. That's because the Ottoman palace had a strict protocol regarding the sultan's food and drink. Whenever the sultan ate, 3 other courtiers ate the same food with him. If the sultan died after eating something, those courtiers would also die. If any of them survived, then it meant that there was nothing in the food that caused the sultan's death, and therefore there was no assassin. In this case, 7 courtiers ate with Sultan Selim, and 6 of them died. Only 1 survived, which meant that the sultan's death could not have been caused by poisoning. But while poisoning was ruled out, the mysterious deaths in the desert were still a problem. How did so many healthy men die so suddenly and inexplicably? Well, historians still don't know, but that hasn't stopped them from trying to find an answer. One historian believes that Selim and his men were killed by a virus carried by migratory birds. Another believes that they all died of cholera, but the most popular theory is that they were victims of anthrax, an infectious disease caused by a bacterium that affects both humans and animals. Whatever the truth may be, the fact remains that the Ottoman Empire was left without a leader, and it didn't take long for ambitious nobles to try and fill the void. Following his father's death, Sultan Süleyman Ferber ascended to the throne at a turbulent time in Ottoman history. The empire was vast and powerful, but it was also deeply divided, with various factions vying for control. Despite these challenges, Süleyman proved to be a capable ruler, balancing the interests of the different groups and keeping the empire together. Under his reign, the Ottomans reached the zenith of their power and glory, conquering Belgrade, Rhodes, and much of Hungary. They also expanded their navy and dominated the eastern Mediterranean. But behind the scenes, a sinister plot was brewing that would ultimately lead to the empire's downfall. One of the most powerful factions in the Ottoman Empire was the Janissary Corps, an elite military unit composed of Christian slaves who had been forcibly converted to Islam and trained from a young age to be ruthless fighters. While they were loyal to the Sultan, they were also fiercely independent and often acted in their own self-interest. Over time, they grew to resent the authority of the palace eunuchs, who were responsible for guarding the Sultan and his family, believing that the eunuchs were outsiders who did not belong in the inner sanctum of power. Tensions between the two groups were always high, but it wasn't until the death of Sultan Selim I that things started to get really ugly. You see, the Janissaries believed that Selim's death was the work of palace eunuchs, and they were determined to get to the bottom of it. So when Selim's widow, Hürrem Sultan, gave birth to a son and heir, the Janissaries saw it as an opportunity to get rid of her and take control of the empire. And so they hatched a plan to get rid of her. Hürrem Sultan was a cunning and ambitious woman who knew how to get what she wanted. She had risen to power by playing the Ottoman men against each other, first marrying Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, and then using his influence to get close to the Sultan. After Selim's death, she turned her attention to the new Sultan, Süleyman Frekir, and used her wiles to capture his heart and become his chief wife. With Süleyman's support, she became incredibly powerful and influential, much to the chagrin of the Janissaries. The tension between them grew until finally the Janissaries revolted. They stormed the palace and confronted the Sultan, demanding that he get rid of Hürrem. But Süleyman refused, and so the Janissaries did something that no one thought possible. They beheaded Ibrahim Pasha and threw his head on the doorstep of Hürrem. Then they marched on the Sultan's wife's chambers, but before they could do anything, they were met by the Sultan himself, along with his bodyguards and the rest of the Janissary Corps. It was a standoff, but it didn't last long. The Sultan ordered his men to open fire, and the Janissaries were routed. Those who survived fled to the hills outside the city, where they regrouped and made plans to strike back. And strike back they did. While the Sultan was away on campaign, the Janissaries seized the capital and forced the Sultan's wife and her allies to flee to a small castle near Adrianople. There they held out for several weeks, but eventually the Janissaries broke through the castle walls and captured Hürrem and her allies. They dragged them through the streets of Constantinople, beating and taunting them before finally executing them. When Sultan Süleyman returned to the city, he found it in ruins. His wife and allies were dead, and the Janissaries were in full control of the empire. Now, one would think that this would be the end of the Janissary Corps, but it wasn't. They had gotten exactly what they wanted, and now they were going to enjoy their victory. For the next 5 years, the Janissaries ran the Ottoman Empire with an iron fist, installing their own puppets on the throne and carrying out their own foreign policy. The damage they had done to the empire was irreparable, and by the time they were finally defeated, the Ottoman Empire was already on the decline. And that is how the Ottoman Empire came to an end, not with a bang, but with a whimper. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. Until next time.